But it seems that the togetherness that the nation saw last year during Remember the Fees Must Fall campaign has been slightly tainted in recent weeks following a series of other protests. Students have called for changes in the language policy. However, tensions have run high, leading to a number of alleged racial incidents. But on Monday, the South African Institute for Race Relations released their findings from a survey that indicates that South Africa's race relations are in fact very good. Joining us in studio is the South African Institute of Race Relations representative Mienke Steytler. A very good morning to you, Mienke.
Good morning, Albus.
First and foremostly, was the survey conducted in all the provinces?
It was conducted across all the provinces. It also mirrored how South Africa's demographic works, just on a smaller scale. So it was carried out by Mark Data, which is an independent company, and they specialize in these sorts of surveys. And it was 2,245 people, which, as I said, mirrored. So 50% of those were under 34, which is the case in South Africa. 78% were black South Africans, 9% coloured South Africans, 3% Indian South Africans, and 10% white South Africans.
What was the total sample, though?
2,245, yes. Obviously, one would want to do something like a census, so it could be really interesting to include these sorts of questions in an upcoming census to actually get that huge, how do 54 million of us feel about it? But this is a good snapshot of what your silent majority, we feel, actually think.
Did it take into account rural as well as urban dwellers as well?
Yes, it did, completely. Okay. Again, mirroring how South Africa works, so there being quite an influx into the urban areas, so a little bit more there than in the rural areas, but yes, definitely mirroring South Africa, trying to give a little photographic snapshot of it.
Now, the period over what time frame was it conducted? Was it only over a period of what? One year, or was it longer?
It was conducted actually over a couple of months, and people were asked a number of questions ranging from: do they think race relations have remained the same or improved since 1994? Do they think there should be race quotas within sport? Do they care what the race is of the person who teaches their children, for example, and so forth? And also, actually, one of the most interesting questions was, what do they think are the most serious issues facing South Africa? And that's where we got a snapshot that showed us that there are actually people in general are more worried about high unemployment, about the crime, of course, and about the water shortage, for example. All those things actually came further up the list than race did.
I was going to ask you about the major findings, but it seems like you've just answered that question. But according to a report, a majority, that is 76% of South Africans, feel that race relations have stayed the same or have improved since 1994. Does this imply, though, that the recent incidents that we've seen in racial, in the universities, as well as some incidents in nightclubs, are actually a minority in the bigger picture?
Yes, we feel so. I mean, we were surprised when we got the results back ourselves, because we've also been also being called about these incidents a lot. We always refer people to the Human Rights Commission because we're a research organization rather than a complaint or investigative organization. But we were surprised ourselves, and so we do surmise that these are minority voices on both sides, like minority white racists and then minority black people who are also feeling hurt, and that the silent majority in between are actually wanting to work together. However, we do say in the report that we mustn't be complacent, that people expressing themselves are expressing a frustration, are expressing hurt, are expressing issues that they have. And so we do say that we must still focus on South Africa's biggest challenges, the economy, the education system, and so forth, because we feel that a lot of these issues actually underlie people's frustration.
Just going back to the sample size, though, of 2,000, is that a significant amount to qualify this particular report?
Yes, it is. In polling, in the polling world, people that actually specialize in that, it is. But as I said, ideally, one would want to do this again, maybe double the sample size, maybe triple the sample size, and of course, including this in our next census could be a very interesting thing to do, because the time has been reached where South Africans are, tallying up what has happened in the last 22 years, how things are going and how we can move forward.
You mentioned earlier that most of the South Africans that answered in the survey said that they would support their children being taught by a person of another race. What does this point to, though?
it points that people care about education. They don't mind what race someone is, as long as the education that that child is receiving is of a high quality. In fact, 91% of the respondents said that they really had no issue with the race of that teacher. And we actually think that's probably the most important question, because 50% of our population are very young. It is where our country's wealth lies. And it was really great to hear that parents put maybe racial prejudice that they might still hold, they put that below their child's success, their child's future.
What are some of the recommendations that came out of this report?
So what we recommend is that, yes, let's continue with the debate. We have always also said that we support the concerns that people raise, be it a service delivery protest, be it on university campuses, as long as obviously it's done within your rights and your responsibilities and so forth. But we recommend that we do need to start looking at policies that build the economy. We especially need to look at our youth unemployment and our education system. We see in data that we didn't publish in this report, but we published 2 weeks ago, showing that there is a disparity in maths, for example, between young black South Africans and white South Africans, who tend to still go to your well-resourced, formerly white schools. Many of the schools in the rural areas, in the informal settlements, are not well-resourced. So we end the report by saying we mustn't be complacent. We need to look at this, we need to tackle this, we need to empower our young people, we need to close the inequality gap, and we need to really raise up that silent majority especially, and get their voices heard.
Does the report acknowledge the violence and the race violence that we've seen on campuses?
Yes, the violence is very unfortunate. It's very sad to see, especially since South Africa's actually done quite well up until now. We quite proudly said last year that we haven't had a race riot in 20 years, whereas if you look at the US, the issues that they've been facing, and even some of the issues that the anti-immigration issues that Europe's facing. But unfortunately, of course, the first 3 months of this year have shown us a little bit of a different picture. What we do focus on is, as much as we talk about policy, there is individual responsibility. Each South African needs to think about what's my role in the reconciliation process. And also, our constitution is very clear. You have the right to protest, but you have the right to protest peacefully. And unfortunately, committing criminal acts in anger might be understandable, but it unfortunately cannot be tolerated.
It's like everything else, you have the right to demonstrate, but you have the responsibility also with that.
Exactly.
Mienke, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Thank you, Elvis.
Where can the report be found?
Yes, it can be found on our website. That's www.irr.org.za. It's free to download to anybody. So, and they're also free to email us at info@irr.org.za if they have any trouble downloading it, but it shouldn't be an issue.
Mienke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Mienke Steytler.